What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. So the Autumn Nations Cup has finally finished. It's a real shame we're not going to get any rugby on the screens back until the Six Nations begins. But I did see today this pop up, this team of the tournament idea that someone has come up with, where people got to vote on who they think was the best player in each position and creating a 15 out of those players. So I'll chuck it on screen for you guys what I saw earlier on. And there was a couple of names in here that really surprised me that people picked to be in a team of 15. So what I thought I'd do is I'm basically going to take this graphic, I'm going to completely steal it. Please don't sue me. Please don't call any sort of copyright. And what I thought would be fun to do is just to go through, see which players I agree with, and change in some players that have impressed me, may not necessarily be the best statistically and made the most meters and what have you, but players that really impressed me and make my team of the tournament. And just for you guys to see who I think, whether you agree with me. I think it'd be interesting to see what people come up with in their own teams. So let's begin with position number 1. So at number 1, Mako Vunipola was chosen, and I have to agree. I think Mako Vunipola through the entire tournament has been absolutely fantastic. Realistically is probably the best number 1 that was in this tournament. There was the potential for Cian Healy to get in, but he did have quite a bad game in their second game, and I think whereas Mako Vunipola realistically has been pretty outstanding through most of the tournament, including getting himself a try, which he must have been quite proud of. You don't normally see props going over for those tries, so well done to him. I think Mako Vunipola is the correct choice there at number 1. At number 2, it has to be Jamie George. I've got to agree there as well. Jamie George had a fantastic tournament, not necessarily so much in the final game against France, but where we did get to see him shine, of course, was in that Georgia game, getting a hat-trick, becoming the first hooker ever in English rugby to get a hat-trick in a game, and realistically throughout the tournament it's just been very impressive in that forward line out, in scrums and in line outs, in those rolling mauls from a line out. Jamie George has to be my number 2 as well. Number 3 is where my first change is going to come in. I understand that they've gone for an English 1-2-3. They've won all their scrums. It makes sense that Kyle Sinclair would go in there at number 3. And he has played relatively well. There's nothing in there particularly that makes him an outstanding player from this tournament. For me, Kyle Sinclair has been doing what he does and nothing really that special. However, one person that did stand out to me for this number 3 position is Andrew Porter, playing for Ireland, playing in an Irish team that has not done well at all, coming from the Six Nations into this Autumn Nations Cup. And realistically has been one of the few standout players for me in that Irish pack. He's done very, very well in the pick and drive game. I think he even got a try in their first game as well. I think he's playing exceptionally well, and I think the number 3 shirt deserves to go from this. Who has impressed me the most? It is that man, Andrew Porter. Number 4 is going to be one of those positions that, of course, we're just going to be uncontested, realistically. Maro Itoje is who they went for. I've got to pick the same person. I did think Quinn Roux actually played very, very well for Ireland as well. No one else has particularly stood out for me across the board. I'm even trying to think of other names to even mention in the lock position. Maro Itoje is, of course, the standout player. If you're a bigger fan of the Lions, as Sam Warburton seems to be, you'll absolutely believe he'll be in that tournament as well, and potentially even making captain, which he did play down himself. He was just focused on this England team, and he's so good at the breakdown. He's so good in line-outs. He has to be my number choice for number 4. Number 5 is one of those weird positions where realistically I went through every single team looking at the players and not a single number 5 actually stood out to me. They've gone with James Ryan, and I've ended up having to pick the same player. I think James Ryan, out of the number 5s across the board, is probably the best, but that by no means makes him the real standout player for me. I was even tempted to move Maro Itoje to 5 and instead move Quinn Roux into number 4. James Ryan didn't do terribly in the tournament. There were so many penalties that he did give away, which is sort of why it was letting me down a bit. I don't think Alan Wynne has had the best tournament, so he was sort of ruled out. Johnny Gray for Scotland wasn't doing anything particularly exceptional. George Cruz hasn't played terribly, but again, nothing that makes him a super standout player. James Ryan did have to take over the captaincy when Sexton went out, and I think he managed to do it relatively well. Hasn't played particularly terribly and has done a couple of good steals at a line-out. So my number 5, reluctantly, because there doesn't seem to be a great deal of competition for that number 5 shirt, is going to go to James Ryan. So this 6, 7, 8 at the back is going to be an interesting one. I'm going to have to do a little switch up here. I think the picks they chose of Tom Curry, Sam Underhill and Billy Vunipola all make sense. The English forward pack has been completely dominant. Realistically, you could probably pick all 8 of these to be English if you were going to have a team to go forwards to play in a future tournament. But I wanted to mix it up a little bit. I didn't want to just have the winning team have all the main players. So what I'm going to do here is I think I'm going to keep Sam Underhill at number 6. I definitely think Sam Underhill has been a bit of a powerhouse for the England side through this tournament. tournament, been fantastic in running, been showing off his jackling ability. We all know just how good Sam Underhill is, and to be honest, that number 6 shirt again is not one that I think is particularly contested in a team of the tournament. I think Sam Underhill has to win that number 6 shirt. Number 7 is where I'm going to switch it up a bit, so I'm going to do 7 and 8 at the same time. I think there's a lot of people that could actually come for this number 7 position, whereas for number 8 there isn't actually a lot of standout players. No one really has been superb. Aaron Wainwright actually did pretty well for a pretty shocking Wales team going forwards. Billy Vunipola they picked makes sense. He's a big ball carrier. He's made quite a few metres. But again, to me, he hasn't done anything particularly outstanding. So I thought I'd mix up my team here. I know Tom Curry can play 6, 7 or 8. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to move Tom Curry to be my number 8. I think Tom Curry is a brilliant player and is arguably one of the best players in the world currently in terms of turnover and penalty wins that he has. Jackling ability is just amazing. His tackle is just on point all the time. I don't think he ever misses a tackle. His work rate is superb. He's a fantastic player. So I'm going to move Tom Curry to number 8 because I don't think number 8s have particularly stood out for me, and that way I can pick another great number 7 to come in. So with Tom Curry moved, let's pick a number 7. So the number 7 for me has to be Justin Tipuric. I think Justin Tipuric, again, is another world-class 7. I think if you lined up some of the 7s we have in the Northern Hemisphere, along with Tom Curry, Justin Tipuric, Hamish Watson, Pete O'Mahony even had a great game. I think there's so many great 7s, but I think to me Justin Tipuric has stood out in a Wales side that has been massively underperforming. He has just been the player through the Wales tournament for this one, really being able to do enough. He again has been absolutely superb in terms of turnovers and work rate, as he always is. He has had comments before in the past where New Zealand coaches have said they wish he could play for New Zealand to take him over. I think he's a superb player, even in a game where Faletau did against Italy, where everyone praised Faletau. If you go back and watch that game, you see the work rate of Justin Tipuric, allowing people like George North and Faletau to have fantastic games. It all begins at Justin Tipuric, and to me, Justin Tipuric has to be my number 7. At number 9, they went for Conor Murray, and this was a bit of a difficult choice for me. I did have a look at some of the teams, and again, number 9 has been sort of similar to number 5. No number 9s have particularly stood out for me. I was surprised by the pick of Conor Murray because I don't actually think the Irish pack hasn't been doing particularly well, including the scrum halves that realistically between them haven't played brilliant games. Jamison Gibson-Park unfortunately didn't get to play an awful lot in this tournament. Conor Murray even went out for a game and sort of came back to try and resolve some issues. He was good to bring on later in the game, but I don't think Conor Murray particularly stood out for me. This one to me went down between two people. That would be Ben Youngs and Kieran Hardy. Ben Youngs, of course, is always going to be a great number 9. However, there was nothing in this tournament that particularly made him stand out for me. I actually think he had a better Six Nations than he has done Autumn Nations Cup. And so for that reason, I thought I'm going to mix it up a little bit here. I'm going to go for Kieran Hardy as my number 9 of the tournament. I think he's come in, done very, very well off the back of making his debut against some strong sides, playing very well, and then, of course, managing to get that try against Italy on the weekend. What we've basically seen from Kieran Hardy is that he's able to play the lesser Tier 1 nations and Tier 2 nations very well and is able to stand out head and shoulders above everyone else. In fact, I think for those games even became a first choice pick over people like Gareth Davis and Rhys Webb. So I think he's played fantastically this tournament. I think he's done very well for a debuter coming in and trying to make a bit of an impact on the tournament. So for me, for just the sheer ability of a player coming in out of nowhere, I'm going to pick Kieran Hardy as my number 9. At number 10, again, number 10 was one of those positions where no one really began to stand out. People were just trying to earn penalties and it went down to sort of kicking ratio. Work rate didn't seem particularly great, of course. Farrell moved to 12, and I don't think George Ford really stood out for me an awful lot. Scotland lost pretty much every fly half I think they had. Van der Veld actually had a really great game, I thought. I think he could have done a little bit more, but I didn't want to pick people that just played one game and then may have had one very good game. That's why there's a couple of switches around. So at the number 10 position, they went for Jalibert, who I think was a great pick, and it's going to be the same one I'm going to pick for this one as well. Jalibert came in off the back of course, Entomac not being able to play. Came in that Scotland game, looked a little bit all over the place. They did have Ramos doing the kicking for that game, but since then has actually managed to establish himself as a pretty good number 10, including in that final against England. The work rate was very, very good, hitting some fantastic lines, of course leading to Dulant's try. I think Jalibert has been very good in this tournament, has been one of the standout number 10s. I think a couple of number 10s across the board could have done better or through injury just weren't able to play. So my number 10 has to also be Jalibert. Moving on to the centres. The centres actually were used an awful lot more than usual in for a game of rugby. They seem to play a lot of teams trying to play it through the centres. They've gone for their number 12 pick of Johnny Williams, and I think I'm going to have to agree with this one. Johnny Williams was fantastic in that centre position, taking over, of course, from a Hadley Parkes that dropped out of the Wales team. Johnny Williams was another one of those people who really stood out in a bit of a collapsing Wales team, not doing particularly brilliantly, making a real big impact. He seems to be a fantastic first receiver, making some good ground. There were a couple of number 12s. Again, Ireland had a lot of issues through injuries of swapping their 12s. Not a lot of people got a lot of game time. Farrell, for me, wasn't particularly exceptional, including in that final where he missed an awful lot of kicks going for number 12, and Scotland had a very similar thing with losing players to the centre. So I think I'm going to go with Johnny Williams because I think he played a fantastic tournament, and I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more of him in the Six Nations coming up. At 13, they went for an interesting choice here. They've gone for Vakatawa, who did have a fantastic game, in all honesty, against Scotland. He almost could have got about 4 tries in that game if he just managed to get onto the end of the ball from some fantastic grubber kicks through. I didn't want to pick people who just played in one game and had a very good one game, so I wanted to switch this up a bit. So my number 13 is going to be Henry Slade. I think Henry Slade has been very, very good, and not a lot of people talk about him. He does an awful lot of work in the background that not a lot of people see. He did, of course, manage to get that try against Wales that came off the hands of Farrell, which was nice to see him actually score a try. Normally, he's the one setting up tries either through fantastic runs or doing little grubber kicks through. He's got a very good work rate, and he is keeping some other brilliant centres out of this team at the minute, of course, with Farrell moving to 12. Henry Slade takes over that 13 position, and I think he's probably been the best consistent number 13 in this tournament. So my number 13 is going to be Henry Slade. Looking at the wings for this one has been a very difficult decision. This tournament has not been very friendly to wingers. There is no one wanted to go wide for whatever reason. The immediate name that would jump to everyone's mind would probably have to be Ndolo for Fiji, of course, getting his hat-trick in against a very desperate Georgia, trying to keep him under wraps. Very difficult for them. But again, I didn't want to pick players that just had that one game and happened to do very well, and who knows how they would have played if they'd played a higher tier nations. Would he still have done as well? I don't really know. So I wasn't going to go for Ndolo, so it made picks very difficult, and realistically, I'm going to do all the wingers in one go here. They went for Duhan van der Merwe and Johnny May. Duhan van der Merwe has probably been one of the more consistent wingers. Of course, both of them play left wing, as you will notice that as they have done, and even I will do here, I will not pick any right wingers. I don't think for some reason any teams wanted to move that ball down to the right wing, and so there's no number 14s in here that stand out. I've went through every week and not a single player actually was like, wow, yes, that person needs to be in the team. So I'm going to have to agree with their decisions on the left wing picks of Duhan van der Merwe and Johnny May, but both of who to me actually didn't play a 100% consistently across the tournament. Johnny May, of course, had the fantastic game against Ireland, getting his 2 amazing tries, one, of course, run at the whole length of the pitch. But across the rest of the games that England played, I actually didn't see Johnny May doing an awful lot. And it became a little bit of an issue for me. I've got a couple of people here that I all wrote down, and none of them stood out as the best. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to join in with him here. I think Duhan van der Merwe deserves that 11 shirt, and I think Johnny May as well could also have that 11 shirt. So I'm going to keep Duhan van der Merwe and Johnny May. I think they're the 2 best picks out of some not particularly special wingers. And I will also add an honourable mention here in Louis Rees-Zammit, who I think had a very good tournament. I don't think we got to see him an awful lot, but the work rate that he has shown coming in as quite a young player defensively was very, very strong. I didn't think he'd be an overly defensive guy. He's not that big, but he has played very well in defence and, of course, has been a great attacking runner. So I did also want to have him in the team, but I don't realistically know who I would say he was better than out of Duhan van der Merwe and Johnny May. So I'm going to keep Duhan van der Merwe and Johnny May as my wingers, and an honourable mention for Louis Rees-Zammit. You guys can pick who we should replace in that team, because I genuinely don't know. And finally, looking at the fullback, this one absolutely astonished me. People went for Stuart Hogg, and I genuinely can't think why. Stuart Hogg's become one of those people just synonymous with great rugby, and realistically, I don't think people analyse Stuart Hogg enough in an analytical sense of whether he's actually having a good game. Stuart Hogg is one of the few players that I think is actually sort of over-bragged about. He's a great attacking runner in terms of a counter-attack, but his choices in not being able to pass to a winger, there are a number of choices he had where he was doing a great counter-ruck with Duhan van der Merwe on his outside, going 2-on-1, and instead of passing to another winger who was arguably quicker than him, he just took the tackle on himself and almost lost the ball a couple of times. Stuart Hogg for me hasn't been impressive really through this Six Nations or this Autumn Internationals. He's just doing a fairly average job at fullback, and I'm quite surprised that people still believe he's up there for the best, especially in this tournament, who really didn't stand out for me, including that game that he had against France where he just kicked the ball dead in the 80th minute. For me, Stuart Hogg is nowhere near that fullback position. But my fullback that I have chosen, I think, had a fantastic tournament. He didn't get to play a lot of time. That was because, of course, the French team managed to get their full team back against Scotland. But my fullback that I'm going to be choosing is Bryce Dulin, who I think is brilliant. I think he is an amazing player. I didn't actually know of him very well at all until this tournament began. And he played his 2 games, one against Italy, where he just seemed to be the only man on the pitch holding the ball, doing every counter run, every kick going on seemed to be coming from him. He just scored unbelievable points in a fantasy league that I was part of, and then he went on to play England and did the exact same thing. I think he's a superb fullback, and I think France will seriously be considering whether Dulin should be starting ahead of Bouthier in the Six Nations coming. I think he's absolutely fantastic, and I think he deserves a little bit more time. I think he needs to work on his kicking game a little bit, just in terms of not just kicking the ball back, but actually maybe trying to kick the ball dead rather than actually kicking it straight to the opposition player, allowing a counter-attack. But I think once he gets past that, I think he's an all-round very, very solid fullback. But there we are, guys. That's going to be my team of the tournament. That's my 15. Let me know down in the comments who you would pick. Have I made any correct changes? Have I made any wrong changes? Write down who your 1 to 15 would be below. I'm really interested to know who people think was the team of the tournament. It's quite fun to mix up some of the people and pick some more outlandish names. Like I added Kieran Hardy in there. I'm sure a lot of people would want a Ben Youngs or a Conor Murray in there. But it's really interesting to know. I'd like to know what you guys think. So make sure you drop it down in the comments just to let me know who you guys thought did well in this tournament. If you've enjoyed today, guys, make sure you drop this video a like. I am currently working on a full mega breakdown of the final of the Autumn Nations Cup, so if you want to see that in a much more analytical sense, make sure you subscribe to check that video out. And I do enjoy doing a lot of these little rugby videos, so make sure you subscribe to the channel to keep up to date with all the videos as they're coming out. I hope you've all enjoyed today, guys. I will see you next time. Bye bye.